Hello, everyone, and welcome to the third event in Hans Seidel Foundation's 2022 series, the China-India Dialogue. In the past two events, we have discussed women and the digital age, as well as women and family policy in India and China. Today, we conclude the series with a conversation on women in local governments in both countries. I'm Julia Berkova, and I have the great pleasure to moderate this event today. And joining us from India and China, we have two brilliant experts, Ms. Chavi Rajawat and Ms. Chidu, whom I will introduce to you in a second. I sincerely apologize for the slight delay. We had a couple of difficulties, technical difficulties, also on my side. So sorry for the slight delay. Also, warm welcome to you, the audience, and it's great that you are interested in this very important topic. First, let me give you some information on the event itself and some technical details. So the event will run for about 60 minutes. We will start with presentations by the two speakers. Each of them will talk about 10 to 12 minutes. And after that, we will move into a Q&A session with you, the audience. And there you have the chance to ask questions to Ms. Rajawat and Ms. Chidu. Please type your questions into the chat box. Your questions will only be visible to the moderator and the speakers, and I strongly encourage you to take this opportunity to engage actively in the conversation. However, if we have too many questions, I ask for your understanding that I might need to make a little selection, and I will pick those topics that fit best with our subject matter. Last but not least, I would also like to thank the All China Women's Federation, who has been supporting this event as well as the last two events. The All China Women's Federation is a partner of the Hans Seidel Foundation, especially the project office in India in the field of, just a second, in the field of gender and women's empowerment since 2003. The All China Women's Federation is actually the largest women's organization in the People's Republic of China, and its main responsibilities are to represent and safeguard women's rights and interests and to promote gender equality and women's development. Now let me move on to introduce the speakers, and I will start with Ms. Jidu from China. She is the director of the Women's Studies Institute of China, WSIC, and Secretary General of the China Women's Research Society. Her research focuses on gender and governance issues, in particular women in politics and women's organizations and public policy processes in China. She has collaborated with her colleagues on several comprehensive research programs and projects on gender mainstreaming in law and policies, and their proposals for women's equal employment right, women's land right, and promoting women's participation and representation in village elections have been widely accepted, which provides support and reference for the implementation of the basic national policy of gender equality. Welcome, Ms. Ju. It's a great pleasure having you. I'm now turning to Ms. Chavi Rajawat and quickly introduce her. She has been elected head of the Village Council of Soda in the district of Tong in Rajasthan in India for 2 terms and has received numerous awards for her work, including the Young Indian Leaders Award from China, CNN and IBN, the First Ladies National Award, the Grassroots Women of the Decade Achievers Award, and many more. I will not name all of them. She's an Aspen Fellow and also a young global leader with the World Economic Forum, and Ms. Rajawat is currently the director of the Oberoi Group of Hotels and serves on the advisory board of Bayer South Asia Council and Vedika Scholars Program for Women in Delhi. She has attended executive educational programs at ISB in Hyderabad and Harvard Kennedy School in the US, and she co-chaired the WEF on India and was invited to be part of the first Obama Summit held in Chicago and Delhi. During her time as head of the Village Council, Ms. Rajawat achieved to implement a highly ambitious agenda and thus enormously improved the life of citizens in her district. It's a great pleasure for me to speak to you, Ms. Rajawat. Welcome. So without further ado, let's move to our first presentation. I would like to give the floor now to Ms. Ju. So Ms. Ju, if you're ready, the floor is yours. Please start with your presentation. Can you hear us, Ms. Juju?
Okay, I can hear it. I just found my my documents.
Right. Do you mind
Could
switching?
you open my kind of sharing kind of things, because I suppose that I guess that you close that.
Right.
Okay. Yeah.
We can see.
Okay.
Sorry. Do you mind switching your camera? Perfect. Thank you very much.
Okay.
We can
Okay.
see.
Yeah. Can you see the PowerPoint? Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Dear colleagues and friends, I'm very glad to be invited to attend the SHA China-India dialogue, and has been invited to present on the local governance, women in local governance in China. Thanks for inviting me, but this is something like my research and reflections to share with you. It's a great pleasure of me. Sorry, I just, okay. My presentation will focus on 5 aspects about the landscape of women in local governance in China, the measures, incentives to enhance women's participation, the outcomes and impacts factors can hinder women's participation, and some reflections. First of all, I would like to introduce the landscape of women in local governance in China. Due to China's huge population, the vast territory, there is a great diversity in community level governance. At local level administration, China applies a system of community level self-governance represented by village autonomy, urban residence autonomy, under the leadership and support of community level party organizations. As of the end of 2020, all the 503,000 administrative villages in China had established villagers communities, and all the 112,000 urban communities in the country had established residence committees. So this is the kind of a big background of the women's participation, which provides arenas of women's political participation in local governance, at first as voters or candidates in community level elections. And the elections include the election of village committees, urban residence committees. Village and urban residence committee are composed of chairpersons, vice chairpersons, and members, and the elections are held simultaneously with those at township and county levels. Second, as administrators to practice grassroots decision-making in terms of handling community public affairs and public service through community meetings and congress on a wide range of subjects, such as the economy and society, infrastructure, social, management, cultural service, environmental, conversation, and etc. And the formulation of self-governance regulations and other key matters in local governance. Third, as representatives in consultation and discussions on local affairs in various forms include popular and grammatic grassroots practices, including resident council, residence workshops, discussions and hearings, courtyard discussions, neighborhood meetings, online roundtables, or offline groups or something, and etc. This is the second, that through all various of kinds of activities, then they just participate in the public affairs, decision-making of their public affairs of their villages or their communities. And last but not least, as rural villages and urban residents to take part in public affairs, which include carrying out decisions, voicing concerns, or oversighting committees to supervise the handling of the community affairs and guaranteeing information disclosure, and etc. So there are some measures and incentives to enhance women's participation in local governance. I will briefly introduce the major kinds of laws and policies. The organic law of the Villagers Committee of the People's Republic of China. This is the kind of the major law concerning village governance. Make clear that there shall be female members of the village committee, and the women villagers representatives shall account for more than 1/3 of the members of the village representative meeting. And the election regulation for the Villagers Committee of the People's Republic of China, which was gave the procedure, the concrete kind of methods for the village election, to make clear that at different stages of village committee elections, such as nomination of candidates, confirmation of election, and by election, specified positive provisions on ensuring the equal participation and representation of women. And there is also, the kinds of the policies by the CPC Central Committee, serious policies concerning the community, urban and rural community consultation, the rural governance, and so on. Also clarify the women's participation in local governance. Okay, sorry. And the National Human Rights Action Plan and the Development Program of Women of China all have some very clear positive provisions for women's participation in local governance. And I will skip them just to show the major ones. Yeah. And I will turn to my second question about outcomes and impacts. First, the changes. Okay, sorry. I don't know why. Yeah. The outcomes, the first outcome is the increasing percentages. The proportion of women, the proportion of women among the village committee members is rising. Women accounted for 24.2% of the village committee members in 2020, an increase of 8.5 percentage points higher than in year 2000. The proportion of women in urban residence committees has remained high. Women made up 52.1% of neighborhood committee, and the female heads of neighborhood committee reached 39% in year 2020. Women are directly involved in the management of public affairs and decision-making by serving as members of committee. So the members of committee has the key kinds of rights in decision-making and the local governance. It is very important channel for them to participate in the rulemaking, in the decision-making in local governance. Okay. And we also see increasing enthusiasm for political participation in the election of village neighborhood committees. According to a national survey, 87.5% of female voters voted seriously, 17.1% points higher from year 2010. Women expressing their views and interests on public affairs in the past 3 years, the proportion of women participating in at least one activities of local governance was 39.8%, including 44.4% for urban women and 31.9% for rural women. And I think we may pay a political attention that rural women aged 18 to 24 were more active, with 52.5% of total rural women's participation, 4.5 percentage points higher than that of rural men of the same age. So that young women are more active than men of their same age in village in the local governance, and 8.8 percentage points higher than that in the year 2010. So we can see the increase of the participation of young women. And I also want to make that more than numbers and feeding, women's participation in local governance is more than numbers and feeding quotas. I will give you a few stories of the women's participation. Sorry, next. Yeah, in the health governance, since the COVID-19 was declared a pandemic in March 2020, it has claimed more than 6 million all citizens that responsible for the fate of their country. The 1.4 billion Chinese people, irrespective of their gender, age, and occupation, have plunged themselves into the battle against the epidemic. China's grassroots self-governance organizations have been working closely with the government to fight the virus, creating a strong line. Some 4 million according to national data, some 4 million community workers have been working in around 650,000 urban and rural communities. Community workers mobilize all forces available, including volunteers, officials, and party members sent to work in communities and members from the local enterprises and public institutions. And what I would like to mention that most of the community workers are women. They conduct monitoring the situation, taking body temperatures, screening for infection, stand guard, carrying out disinfections, disseminating government policies, sanitizing neighborhoods, and provide care and assistance to local residents. And this is the picture that, because I participate even in their activity and to do the kind of screening and guard my neighborhood, dedicated and responsible, they made an important contribution to safeguarding public health and fight against the COVID-19. So this is one example I would like to raise that about health governance. Another example I would like to raise about digital governance. With the network technology and political participation behavior integration, the rise of the network policy participation has been the current mostly used channel for people's political participation. And more women, including women, especially more and more people, including women, tend to through the internet platform for political information attention, publishing, discussion, and forward their opinion and comments. And that gave you an example that since the year 2021, the revision of women's law has been inviting comments and suggestions among the public via internet. Right now, up to now, there has been 6,181 persons has raised more than 22,000 pieces of suggestions, so all via internet on the website of the National People's Congress. Another example I would like to give that about the environmental governance, female volunteers, this is in this picture, wearing red vests, holding collectors, garbage bags, and other labor tools, pick up waste paper pieces, cigarettes, butts, and paper towels along the river bank. At the same time, the female volunteers also took the initiative to publicize the ecological and environmental protection concept of water resources, protecting environment to protect the past methods. This is the picture that I took in the Zhejiang province in Anji County, and where the women organization or a women's federation, local women's federation organized sisters. They call the activity Sister Guarding River activity. So this is, I pay visit to them in year 2019. I said, this is where I took the picture of their activity. So these sort of example, I think also a pair example, but I will not tell in brief, in detail. It's about cultural governance. And this is the Rural Spring Festival Gala. The Rural Spring Festival Gala is very famous in China, but in rural areas, women take the lead to organize their the gala in their organization, in their villages. Sorry. Okay. Yeah, more than this is the case in Jiyun County, where the gala, the women organized gala. More than 95% of the performers participating in each Spring Festival gala in Jiyun County are female, and their main status is mainly reflected in the social organization ability. So they through their activities, they practice to organize themselves and to really mobilize men in their villages, even in the village committees, to facilitate their activities. And this is something like their activities that are very important. It's a kind of provide a dynamic village life for the villages. Some factors hinder women's participation in local governance. I would like to say that before 10 years ago, maybe 20 years ago, the women's kinds of a lower educational status, or their something like gender prejudice were most serious. But now it seems that the burden of care work is the most important issue for women that hinder women in in-depth participation in village, in local governance, especially with the population changes that each family can have 3 children, and women may have more kinds of a time devoted to family affairs. So this is one issue that women face if they want to participate more actively in community, in local governance. A second, I would like to raise that social attitudes. Although there is a kind of the public raised gender awareness since the 1995, the Fourth World Conference, there's still gender prejudice, and especially in some far more rural areas, and people still hold that men more able than women. The third is social support. For me, for my investigation, I found that insufficient sort of public care services for children and aged people is really a kind of a hinder women's participation in local governance. And finally, access to resources and opportunities. Because of the women devoted more time to their care work, so it's kind of seemed to them to have less opportunity or less kind of a time to learn how to perform public administration compared to their male counterparts. So finally, some very brief reflections. Right now, the COVID-19 pandemic is eroding decades of a gain in global development, in particular, the gains in gender equality. The implementation of UN's 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development is encountering difficulties, and this is no exception in China. So women's development face more difficulty. So this is but still the hope and the momentum for advancing women's full and equal political participation never be stronger. So this is in this kind of a serious particular period of time where there is a strong call for increasing women's participation in governance. And second, I think when women lead equally as men in the political arena, it makes for stronger decision-making and more representative governance. Women in politics, in my research, they pay more attention to the welfare of the people, to the cultural, ecological protection, cultural and events or something like that. So let women, increasing women's political participation at local level will no doubt to improve this situation of women, not only women, but all the citizens, the villagers in the near future. And I think I'm also optimist to see the opportunity. It's also an age full of hope. We must get a good grasp of the overarching developing trend in the world, especially in China. We must need to seize the opportunity or to do more research and to act in unison to promote women's leadership and representation in local governance. And this is my presentation. Thank you for listening. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your very interesting presentation, especially the reflections in the end. I personally learned a lot from your presentation, and I already have a couple of questions. And I see we have one question in the chat already, and I strongly encourage the audience to ask more questions. But before we come to the Q&A, I would like to turn to Ms. Rajawat now and give the floor to you for your presentation. Over to you, please.
Thank you, Julia. Thank you, Ms. Du, and thanks HSF for having me here, and to all those in the audience who we cannot see, thanks for taking time to join us. Well, on the topic, it's great that we have Ms. Du and me representing our respective countries, which I do believe culturally in terms of values, especially where women's role within the households are concerned, as already pointed out, the responsibilities as a wife, as a mother, as a caretaker of younger ones and the elderly. I think that is something that is quite similar. And therefore, of course, on the topic, it's interesting that we are sharing this platform, which I'm absolutely in love with, and of course, the topic in itself. Speaking of women in India, I'd say women have played a very, very key role and there have been many known and unsung heroes since the time of India's freedom struggle, where a lot of women have gone behind bars and fought shoulder to shoulder to win India's freedom as we see today. Of course, initially, at that time, in politics, we did not see too many women taking on that role, but as of today, it has changed. And I think after the Prime Minister of Sri Lanka, the world saw its second lady Prime Minister in Indira Gandhi, who was our first lady Prime Minister. And this was in the 60s. So we've done fairly well in terms of getting women into, or getting the foot into the field of politics. And I think things have just changed. And if I speak of India as of today, and women representation in not just local governments, but in politics per se, I think we've come a long way. Things are changing and picking up speed much more now than ever before. So post Indira Gandhi, of course, as many of you would know, and for those who don't, we've had many amazing women leaders such as Sushma Swaraj, Lalita, Sheila Dikshit. Sonia Gandhi has led the Congress party for many years now. Ms. Mamta, Pratibha Patil, Margaret Alva, Vasundhara Raje, Smriti Irani, our current finance minister, Nirmala Sitharaman, Ms. Murmur. I mean, I can go on. The list is endless. And many of them have held positions as head of states, as chief ministers, as governors, as presidents, and of course, many more. And it's because of these women that I think more women have come into politics, because they've been very inspiring. And not just that, what's been amazing at having women leaders is the fact that they've pushed for more women to come into the sphere and the sector of politics. And I think it's because of that that the number of women representation has grown, not just at the local governments, that's something that started early on, but I think even at the national level, it's something that we are fighting for. And I'm sure we will see many more come forth. And I think it's only because of that our voices as women are being heard, our agendas for women have been taken very, very seriously and represented in policy making, which is very visible in the rollout of the schemes and projects that even the current regime has. So the recognition that parties are making towards women within India across all sectors, be it the urban or the rural, is phenomenal. And I think that's also giving recognition to us as women, as voters, because of which earlier I noticed even in villages, women would perhaps seek opinion of their respective family members in deciding who to vote for, which doesn't happen any longer, especially if the person who's getting elected or voted in, if there is a lady who's submitted her nomination, then women, by and large, if they know the background of the person and what kind of person the lady is, then by far it's the women and the young girls who will vote a lady in. And I think that change, where we are becoming more independent, even as voters, is phenomenal. And I think that recognition has finally come in across all parties. And as a result of that, a lot of stuff is changing in politics, in the private sector, in pretty much every sector, be it sports, agriculture, academia, science, and technology, and of course, politics in itself. I'd say as far as local governance is concerned, the credit largely goes to the 73rd and 74th Amendment of the Constitution, which was, if I remember correctly, in 1994, that brought in the quota system, which ensured that seats were reserved, 33% seats were reserved for women in local governance. And that gave a platform for women to come forth. And I think that was perhaps one of the path-breaking reforms for the Indian governance. And in fact, the very fact that I became a sarpanch, which is the head of a village council in 2010, it happened because of that very quota system. It was a reserved seat for women, which meant that only a woman could contest for that post. And because of that, the village residents decided to bring me in from the city back to my village and get me to stand up for the elections so that I could bring in the development that the village needed to see. Of course, when they brought me in, it was pretty interesting because I was working in the private sector and I was in the process of setting up my own business in the urban space. I lived in a city, studied in a city. I got my business management degree. And so for someone like me to come back, to move back into local governance was something that wasn't considered the norm. And I think because of that, media, of course, had been very, very kind. I got a lot of recognition because here was this very urban-centric woman who was making the big bucks, who quit all that to go back to her village at the lowest level of governance, which unfortunately was not getting the kind of attention that I feel it deserves. And I'd like to believe, probably going to sound like I'm blowing my own trumpet, but I'd like to believe with me having taken that step, things have changed. There are many more people like me who have quit their jobs, who have thought of going back to the respective villages to take on similar roles at the local governance. And I'm talking not just of the youth, but women themselves. We've had ex-bankers who've gone back. We've had engineers who've gone back. So it's phenomenal to see that change happening. And also in the field of education, there are a lot of young students, a lot of young women and men also, who want to go back and serve the rural sector, to understand what the country is all about. And they do it with immense dedication and sensitivity. I've had the pleasure of having many young students from Delhi University and other colleges, very prestigious colleges, who have come into my village and been the champions in helping me with my work. So it's really wonderful to see how things are changing. It's no longer considered that you look at serving your fellow citizens only after you reach a certain age or after having made certain amounts of money. So coming back to my role as the head of a village council, when the village residents came to me, it is a patriarchal society. So maybe Ms. G would be able to see certain similarities there. It was the decision of the men, essentially, to bring me in. And when they came to me, I told them that, listen, guys, I understand where you're coming from, and I'd love to be in the village to help you, but do understand that I'm going to be unbiased, and I will not play to your tunes, because I did know that there was a tendency for those who are voting you in to take benefit of that. And of course, my question to these elderly men was, how am I going to manage? Because I was just about setting up my business, and the balancing act was perhaps the only question that cropped in my mind. And they said, oh, well, you don't have to worry. You just have 2 meetings in a month in the village and 1 meeting at the block level. And you attend those and we'll take care of the rest of it. And I told them that's not going to happen. I'm not going to be a puppet and there's not going to be a proxy leadership. If I choose to lead, I will give it my 100% and perhaps even more. And that's exactly what I did. Very interestingly, I'd say I was able to succeed primarily because of the support I received from the women within the village, the young girls and the youth. They became my extended team. So whenever we had any initiative, a new project that we were taking on in the village, they were the ones, especially educated young women, they were the ones who would go out in the field, and women primarily because they had access not just to the men, but also to the women who worked indoors. And perhaps certain households wherein the women did not get to come out too much because of the chores involved within the household as well as the agricultural fields. So they were the ones who were the real champions who went about creating awareness, who went about informing people of what kind of projects we were coming up with, and also nudged them into participating in whatever initiatives I took for the betterment of the society. So it was really wonderful to see that. And also women, mostly mothers of girls who were hesitant about how to support the girl child and the education, especially if the girl had to be sent away and out of the village, especially if she was adolescent. So because there's a certain fear of safety concerns, who's she going to stay with? It's going to be in an unknown city. And is that a decision that we should take? So it was very interesting to see how a lot of mothers would come to me. And I realized that all that was really needed was certain moral support. And I would tell them, I'm here for you, come what may. And do remember that you may have to hear some things from certain people, of course, the male prejudices, but maybe it'll just be for a short while. Once the girl child is on her own 2 feet, then the very people who probably posed as a hindrance would be the very ones who would give you credit, who would acknowledge that the girl has done well and would be proud of her. And it was very interesting to see how quickly that shift within the community was happening. So, and I've noticed that when there's a woman leader, as Ms. G also pointed out, I think women per se are very inclusive. A woman feels far more comfortable talking to another woman about her issues, which she may not be able to raise if it is a male leader involved, especially personal issues. And that support coming through reaps huge benefits, because not only does she benefit, not only does a girl child benefit, but also how she raises her sons, that changes. There is a certain sense of equality that comes within the household. And those prejudices, the biases reduce. And I've noticed how with me becoming the leader of my village council, the fathers wanted to see their girls ride bikes because that's what I did. They wanted to see them riding tractors because that's something that I did. So suddenly there was this sense of openness that came into the village where certain stigmas or certain apprehensions that existed just kind of withered away very, very quickly. And that for me was beautiful. And as Julia pointed out, at C Media, I think my work got recognition very early on. And on a lighter note, I think my claim to fame, apart from being someone from the corporate sector with a business management degree, the first of the kind to have walked into and stepped into the leadership role at the local governance, the other claim to fame being that I was a jean-clad sarpanch. A lady working in the rural sector in an elected post with jeans, keds, and a hat on her head is not really a common sight. But again, that has changed ever since I became the sarpanch in 2010. So with media's recognition, of course, I was very lucky to have many doors open up, wherein I became the Young Global Leader with World Economic Forum, an Aspen Fellow. And through these platforms, and of course, many more, I got to network, I got to learn from other people, and I got to access a whole range of people who not only helped me with funding, but also the expertise that was lacking, where we had certain gaps where the government couldn't quite support us, where it did not have schemes and projects to help us with what we wanted to do. So, so for me, that was, I'd say, a huge opportunity. I did go on to getting contested again in 2015, one term being of 5 years. Now, 2015, it was not because it was a reserved seat for women, but I think it was purely because I had done good work during my first term, and the village residents got after me and pitched me against men. I was the only woman standing up against plenty of other men, and I won again with a thumping majority. And I think that only goes on to show that that when you work with integrity, when you're able to deliver, and I was able to deliver on all accounts during my first term, on all aspects that men, women, and the youth had asked me and demanded of me as a leader. So it was really wonderful to see the faith and the trust that I had been able to win, not just by the women and the girls, but by men as well. So the stigmas that are perceived, that exist, and the prejudices that people believe that exist in the patriarchal society, I think for a woman, her work speaks for her. And in my case, I can clearly say that and state that that is what helped me. That is what helped me win the respect and earn the respect that I received from menfolk across all age groups, even those who were in my opposition, because of the fact that I'm very inclusive. Those are the very people who, now that my term ended in 2020, and I on my own chose not to contest again because I wanted to give someone else an opportunity, despite it being a reserved seat for women. It's those people who were in the opposition who I always spoke to, and they're the ones who are sustainably carrying forward the projects that I had initiated. And that is something that at the local governance is often seen as a matter of prime concern, because when the opposition comes in, then the project carried forth by the previous leader usually is ignored, and all the money spent there is often wasted. So I think that is something that gives me a lot of confidence, not just in my own self, but also in the fact that if one sets out to do something and has the conviction to do it, you can do it, and the support comes through irrespective. And I think it's because of that I've earned and I've been announced as the changing face of rural India and the changing face of Indian politics. And I hope to see that change increasing far more and happening much faster. I have full faith in the next generation, more so because they have larger avenues. They've got greater awareness, more potential. They're far more curious. And I think the initiative taken to make India digital has seen a huge change wherein pretty much every household has at least access to at least one smartphone. So that allows the youth, that allows the elders to also gain access to a lot of information that otherwise they may not have been aware of. And as a result, people are now becoming more vocal. They're speaking up. Even young girls are now beginning to speak up a lot more and question the system, question the status quo. They're aware of their rights. They're aware of what they stand for as an individual. And I think that for a woman in a society which was restricted within the four walls or the area of the village, because access to the outside world for a young girl wasn't that easy. So to see that is really, really beautiful. I am currently running and helping, rather, working in the field of education. So I'm able to really see up close and personal how that change is happening. And yeah, so with that, I guess I'll end here and leave the platform open for questions and take those on and add more inputs.
Thank you very much, Shafi. That was absolutely fascinating, especially your personal experiences with being elected. Can I just quickly maybe ask you a follow-up question before I turn to Jiju with another question that we have in the chat? What was your personal motivation when you mentioned it was a huge step for you to or come back from your city life to the village and take up these responsibilities? And as you didn't have this experience before, what was your motivation to finally do that? What was your vision that you could change? Because I understand it must have been a very difficult circumstance, and I'm sure it wasn't that easy to take this decision. So what was your primary motivation?
See, actually, I've been going to my village. It's where my family hails from. That's where my roots are. So in that sense, I was familiar with the village. But yes, I had not worked in the rural sector before. So in that respect, it was a drastic change, moving from, let's say, a very organized private sector to perhaps one of the most unorganized ones. So that for me, I think was very, very interesting. And it brought with it a huge learning for me that has, I think, made me a better individual and hopefully a better leader as well. But I'd say the biggest motivation for me was the fact that my own friends and my colleagues in the urban space who were well educated, who accessed the media on a daily basis, I realized that they had a very myopic perspective of what rural India is all about. And also what I'd seen from when I was a child to now to my being elected in is that the funding through the government for rural development has increased manifold in terms of the amount, the kind of projects and the initiatives the government has. And yet I feel that somewhere there's a gap. And that is what I wanted to fill in. And I wanted people, and I still want people to recognize the fact that while it may be the lowest level of governance, but it is a very, very important position, because this is where, as a leader, you get to oversee all the projects that get executed. And therefore, you get to ensure that those are executed well. And the vision that you and your team has as an elected team that's been voted in, and what the constituents want, that is carried forth. Because I feel that as you rise higher, while it is much easier, and of course it brings in a lot of perks and a lot of other benefits, but yes, you can make policy level changes. However, what the vision of that policy is, or what the vision of that scheme or project is, and what actually happens at the execution level, you may not necessarily be able to see it be executed exactly as you had wished for it to be executed. So that is something that I feel people do not recognize. And I just wish people would wake up to that. Also, I feel that in cities across India, the urban cities, a lot of development has happened in terms of infrastructure. And therefore, it doesn't grant room to make too many changes. While in villages, there is that beauty of it providing you a cleaner canvas, where a lot of thoughtful development can be brought in, provided the people with the right expertise come in and work together. I think the spirit of working together as a collaboration is very, very important. And I think what's happening now is also, even for countries that are looking at investing in India, of course, there is a lot of eyeball towards Asia per se. But I think what's great about India is the fact that we have a huge youth bulge. And apart from degrees, the academics, what we are also looking for, what the youth is looking for, is vocational training. And that is something that I feel the developed nations can offer in a big, big way, be it in the field of agriculture, be it in the field of science, STEM, especially for young kids in high schools and colleges. So there is huge opportunity that would be a win-win for not just the residents of India, but even for people abroad who are looking at investing in India. And I just wish people would come forth, because at the end of the day, We're living on the same planet. We're breathing the same air, irrespective of which part of the planet we're in. And people just need to recognize that and make that change happen.
Thank you very much. I especially like your notion about the importance of next generations. I'm myself a co-chair of a next generation leaders network. We're not focused on local governments, but Euro-Atlantic security. But it's really great to see that also in conversations with very experienced leaders, the recognition for importance of the younger generation is growing, I think. And that brings me to a question in the chat for Ms. Jidu. So I'll read out a question. So what do you think is the reason for women between 18 and 24 in particular who are more involved in local governments? Is it because men in that age group give more importance to their studies and finding jobs?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Thank you, Julia. I think it's a very important and also an interesting question. Before we assume that this kind of situation, because men migrate out to the village, to big cities for better, for the and higher paid jobs, and women left behind the village. At first, we assume that this may be the main issue or the main reason. But when we do further investigations or interviews, we found that women, in fact, has kind of because they have a kind of a high educational educational levels than their mothers, their mothers and grandmothers, and also because more and more women have been also migrate out with their husbands or with their families. They open their eyes and they go out of the world to gain knowledge, to gain experiences, to work in the factory, and then return back to the village. And then I think it's a kind of they open their eyes and raise their capacity and the capability. So this is, my view, is the major reason that why young women is more active than men in the village affairs. And also I think maybe another issue question is something like the reason is that more men than women migrate out to the big cities. So this is the two reasons may explain this situation. But I'm not really, I think he's not convinced that it's only because of the less men, the men kind of go out for higher education or migrate out. It's not only the only reason. I think the most important issue or reason we shall see the subjectivity of the young women in the village, in the community, both at the village level, urban areas, and big cities. I think it's kind of the gap between the women in urban and rural areas. I think it has been lessening year after year. I think it's my view. Yeah, thank you.
That's a very interesting notion. Jidu, can I ask you another question about, I know we're slowly running out of time, but there's one specific question I would be interested in, and that's the issue of male support for women getting into positions of power. And we all know it's important for women to support other women and to pave the way to bring them into positions of power, and that's something Xavier has also spoken about. How do you see the importance of male support, and how can men more actively support women, regardless of age, to get into decision-making positions, whether it's on the local government's level or on a higher level?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. You mean that women support women at different levels, or is particular at high levels?
No, I mean that's important as well, but also support by men for women to get into decision making.
Yeah, exactly. I think you raise a very good question, because in China too, we really feel that very kind of is a need not only for women to support women, but also for men support women as well, in particular. And my investigations in the rural areas, I found that where there's active participation of women in rural areas, whereas men, I think maybe they in the village or as village leaders or as the partner of women, they support women. I think they're very important and very kind of support. So I think also that we call it the partnership, how to build a partnership between the women and the men, and also especially when in the UN we call it men for women, he for she, something I think is very important, because without the support of men and other women, women participate in the local governance would be, I think, is very difficult, because they really need some help, and including men's changing their views of women's capacity, men changing their kind of a situation to kind of understand women's situation, to help women, and etc. So this is really very important issue. Is I think in India is this kind of issue, in China too, that we need to get men involved in women participate, to promote women in local governance.
Thank you very much. That's an interesting view. May I turn to Chavi as well for her views on the issue, maybe?
Well, there's no one answer to that question, but there are a lot of aspects that need to be worked on. And I think what really works best is having dialogues, just the way how you and I are having this conversation, where we respect each other and we're at par, we're not threatening each other. I think that is the best way to really get people on board, to understand each other and to work for and with each other. And I see a lot of that change happening in India, not just in families with backgrounds similar to mine, but also in the rural spaces where the awareness that I spoke of is creeping in. And as a result, a lot of girls are getting supported. Say, for example, if they're not getting supported by the elders in the family, then the brothers step in, or the sisters step forth. And if not that, then a neighbor will step in. So I think that momentum is beginning to happen, or rather, I think it's already happened considerably. And it's really good to see how, with the opportunities that are there, and parents recognizing that a lot of fathers themselves are willing to get the daughters to take up jobs where they have to move out of the city, where they or rather move out of the village and move into a city. And the apprehensions that existed earlier are no longer there. The focus on education is far more. And I myself, in fact, during my first term, within the first year of my getting elected in 2010, I had a lot of young girls who'd never met me, not from my village, but other villages in the rural sector, who would call me up and say, would you please speak to our parents and tell them that we want to study and not get married right away. We do want to get married, but not till we've not finished our graduation, whatever degree they wanted to take. And I have spoken to the parents, more so the father, and it really wasn't that difficult to make that shift happen, because all I spoke to the father of the girl was that, hey, listen, your girl's doing well. Think of it as you investing in her future, because tomorrow if she graduates and she applies for a job, she will be able to contribute towards the income of the family. And also she would be respected when she gets married into another family, because she is adding value to that household. And that's just about all that I had to say. And men who had never met me in their life before heard me, and the girls were allowed to continue to study. So that's why I said dialogues are the most important. It's how we do it, rather than using the top-down approach. If we are having this respectful conversation, people do hear, people do understand. Men have come forth. In fact, again, I'll just take an example of when I got elected in. So my first term, we were 8 women in my team and 4 men. And these were women who were married into the village. And as a result of that, the freedom for them never addressed the entire village ever before. So I told them that what you're going to do is thank the voters for electing you and introduce the rest of our team to that specific ward or area that you are representing. So day one, only with the first two women, they were like, what are we going to say? We don't know. So I said, don't worry, I'm going to just whisper into your ear and you just say it out loud. I just had to do it with the first two. The others just took over on their own. So day one, we had one of the husband call me in the evening saying, I want my wife back home because she needs to cook. That's no problem. Within 20 to 30 minutes, I had all the women dropped to the respective houses in my car. Next day, we stepped out again. The same man called. And I was about to give the phone to his wife. And he said, please don't. I have called to let you know, and please let my wife know not to worry. I've called to let you know that this evening, either I'll take the help of my neighbor, and if that's not possible, I will cook for the family, and you all can be out in the field for as long as it takes, 12 a.m., 1 a.m., 2 a.m., it doesn't matter, but please continue doing whatever work you're doing. This was just day two of us being voted into the office. So that's the kind of shift that happens with those open discussions. And I think that's all that really is needed. People need to, I think both men and women need to realize that we're not opposites. We complement each other. And I think once that happens, that support that men need from women and what women need from men, that kind of comes through. And I'm just happy to share that I'm seeing that happening a lot more across India, in the urban sector as well as the rural. And I have a huge, huge hope for this country and what the future holds for it.
Thank you. And I guess I've been hearing that you're full of hope from Jidu as well, which I find really great. We're unfortunately running out of time, so I apologize to those in the audience whose questions we were not able to answer today. A huge thank you to you, Jidu, and to you, Chavi, for speaking to us, for your presentations. I find it fascinating to hear that there are so many similarities also in terms of how both your countries are overcoming prejudices, how women are raising to positions where they are making active contributions in their community, where they are active decision makers. It was also interesting to hear that women are obviously prioritizing different topics, which are extremely important for their communities, including Jidu, you spoke about environmentalism, and you spoke about cultural issues in particular, and then of course the importance of the next generation, and we just spoke about the importance of support by men, which is also a similarity in both your countries. That's, I think, also a key issue to bring women into powerful positions, as is the support by other women. And last but not least, you're both seeing your countries on positive trajectories. And I have noted two sentences. So for you to do, it was you think it's an age full of hope, and you think it's a time where we can seize opportunities. And for you, Chavi, it was you said, I'm not going to be a puppet. It's going to be 100% leadership. A sentence that I wrote down because I found it very powerful, both that's your sentences. And with that, I'm closing the seminar. Again, thank you very, very much for your presentations, for answering questions, and thanks for the audience to listening. And Hans Seidel Foundation will send you a small survey after the session, and we would be pleased if you could answer the survey. And with that, have a nice day, and thank you very much again.
Thank you.
Thank you, Julia. Thank you all.
Chavi.